Hello, I'm Caitlin, and I want to talk about what I view as the best level to start at for a new DM. Um, when you begin DMing, especially as a newer player, there's often the urge to start your D&D adventure with everybody at level 1. Whilst this can be a really good way to start a game, I want to talk about how starting at a slightly higher level can be a lot more beneficial for both you and your players. At level 1, you have relatively simple abilities as a player character. You may gain a few simple features, especially if you're a martial style character. Divine Sense, Lay on Hands for paladins, Fighting Style, Second Wind for fighters. For a wizard, you get things like um, very basic spells that maybe kind of pack a punch, but you're significantly lacking in spell slots. And when it comes to overall survivability, your hit dice, whilst I believe at level 1 is generally considered maximum, is still going to last you maybe a single hit if you're a martial class, plus a little bit extra, if that, for a ranged or more spellcaster based class. One of the issues with starting at level 1 if you're a new DM is finding your footing. Obviously, if you're learning the game, there are a lot of creatures, spells, and items that you can employ as a DM, especially if you've been getting into this due to the fantasy of D&D or watching shows, and you really want to kind of um, match what they do in those programs. It can be tempting to kind of go all out with this big narrative opening, and level 1 doesn't really work to that gist. Now, don't get me wrong, early level D&D can be really fun. It provides a more difficult challenge. You have relatively little bonuses, not a lot of damage. It's simple, it's scary, and everything is a bit of a struggle, which is fun, and it's its own kind of gameplay style in of itself. If you've ever run the official adventures, especially those that start at the early levels, they can be punishing, like straight up difficult, especially if you wander into like an area that you may not necessarily be ready for. It is a struggle. But that might not necessarily be the best thing for someone who's learning the game. If you're a brand new DM, what you probably don't want to do is immediately kill your players because they've wandered into an elemental some like few levels before they were really supposed to. At this point, you're probably saying, okay, Kate, I get it. Don't start at level 1. So, is that it? Well, no. I think that the best level for you to start at is level 3. And this reason is the archetypes that most of the classes will now get. Some might get it sooner, some maybe later, depending on subclasses, but in general, each of the classes gets paths, archetypes, these general kind of traditions which push the class into really feeling like their actual class. If you're a paladin early on, yeah, you have divine sense, lay on hands, you're going to work into smites and stuff at level 2, but you don't actually have an oath until 3. And the sacred oath for a paladin is really the core of what your paladin is. If you're a vengeance paladin, that's very different from the other styles of paladin. If you're a rogue, your archetype significantly changes how you're playing. From an assassin with disguise kits and poisons, assassinate, to the inquisitive style, which is a more kind of like you reading the room, spotting like different natures through an encounter, a little bit more investigative. And then you just have the scout, that frontline kind of elven ranger that runs ahead and points out various problems, reacts to things. They're all very different. And you might be saying, well, okay, this is all very good for the player, but this is a DM's perspective. Why do I, as the DM, care when my players kind of get online? Doesn't that make it more difficult for me? Well, to a degree, yes. Your players get more meat on the bones of their characters. There's more decisions that they can make that challenge you and your world building. But as a new DM, you should want that. One of the quickest ways to learn is to kind of throw yourself into the fire a bit, and level 3 is that to a degree, but in a very safe way. Level 3 is more balanced in terms of D&D, um, mostly because your players get free rolls of the hit dice, or however you're balancing that, so they have a stronger health pool. They may have a slightly higher AC, depending on how they're running that, a few more spell slots, and some forms of equipment, a bit more skill, like proficiencies, and generally just a little bit more in their wheelhouse to survive the things that you throw at them. One of the kind of biggest stepping stones as a new DM is being able to tell what you should be throwing at your players. No one really expects that a new DM will immediately know what monsters they should be using, what NPCs they should be using for a low level player. The reason why I'm saying level 3 is the best starting point for that is there are a lot of monsters and creatures that you could run in D&D, and even more if you start to homebrew in things or just kind of make up the stats um, as per other monster designs. And it's very easy to say, I want to run a group of skeletons and have like an undead encounter in a graveyard. That whole kind of shtick of you wander in the Dark Souls graveyard and suddenly all the dead bodies rise up and you're surrounded. Sounds great. Sounds like a fun encounter. But all it takes is one or two lucky hits early on against a level 1 fighter. Now your party has no front line, and they're gonna die pretty quickly if they don't really pull themselves out of the muck and find a way to deal with these skeletons. Which is fine if you want a harsher start to your campaign. However, you might not want that if you're a newer DM and you're just kind of getting the grips to things. You might want these larger health pools to allow you to have a couple more encounters, a couple more sessions without accidentally TPKing your party, and kind of getting to grips both on the players' aspects of them learning their characters and role playing, and you as the DM learning what you can throw. The reason why level 3 is stronger is that, yes, there's more health, there's more AC, there are more spell slots, but it's the fact that the players have more room to breathe. There will always be encounters where you open up and as a DM, you just get that amazing natural 20 to start things out and you've straight up crit the front line or you've knocked out the spellcaster and things look bad for the players. That's just D&D. Sometimes someone gets a lucky roll and it really messes with the pace of things, but that's also really fun and it creates a situation where, there's a little bit of agency and chaos in what's going on. But it's only fun if players have room to react to it. And my argument is that a level 1, for a newer DM and for newer players, they don't really have the skills and tools there to deal with it, other than run away or, as a lot of players like to do, just stand there and fight, even in a situation where, frankly, they're going to die. So, in an effort to not keep things too long, I try to round off my point by saying level 3. Narratively speaking, level 3 is the best starting level for a new DM. There are a lot more things that you can kind of get away with doing. You can have more outlandish creatures, goblin armies, the undead, gnolls, all sorts of like more mystical fantasy creatures that you would see on an epic adventure, as opposed to level 1, where, you know, we've all played those RPGs where you start out and it's go kill some rats in a basement. That's more the level 1 shtick. If you're going for a campaign on the setting of Lord of the Rings, where you go off on that fellowship and adventure, level 3 is more where that's happening. Your player characters are starting to get to grips with things, they're becoming stronger than just your average town guard, they finally have some heroism to them. And as a DM, getting into this kind of setting, I think that that's what you want to start with. It's the best building block, and it will give you the best chance to make a good, constructive game and really make things stick. In my next video, I'm probably going to be talking about starting at a higher level for different styles of campaign. But for this, I think this is probably the best point that we can leave off at. Let me know what you think in regards to starting at level 3, your own starts for campaigns, and just your general thoughts in the video. As always, I'll leave some links down below, mainly just outlining a couple of the websites that I briefly looked over while I was talking. Um, and if you're interested in supporting me, then I'll leave my social down below, as well as my Patreon, where I create homebrew items and other kind of D&D adventures, classes, and various things that you can use in your own campaigns. Well, thanks for watching, and see you next time.